You want to be held right here? Weird fun fact before I launch into today's video. I don't know why, but having a cat cured my cat allergies for the most part. I still sort of wake up sneezing or go to bed sneezing, but I don't have like the itchy eyes. I don't have like the huge reaction that I used to get. Funny how 3 years of working at a vet couldn't do it, but having a little boy, a little son, having a little son did it. Ow! Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is lynndjung. I am an author tuber, booktuber, and whatever else I feel like tubing tuber. Today, I wanted to actually put out another little book recommendations video, which I haven't done in kind of a hot minute. We're gonna do book recommendations because I have been reading a lot more recently. A lot of my reading has been arcs, which as you guys probably know, I don't love that much because I just feel like I can't put the book down. I am a chronic DNFer. If I don't like a book, I put it down. But unfortunately, that can't happen with arcs because I'm very like neurotic about keeping my percentage good. In NetGalley, it sort of keeps tracks of how many books you actually finish and review and send reviews in for. Whatever, that was a long spiel about nothing. Let's talk about 7 books with fairy tale energy that I really recommend. So fairy tale energy here, as a little disclaimer, is just going to be like either direct inspiration or just a vibe that they have, or what I feel like is a modern fairy tale. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, usually more in terms of short stories because I've been wanting to write like a short fairy tale, and I have been writing a little fairy tale. So fairy tale is a type of folklore actually, which is cultural stories that are shared within a culture or a group and can often be disseminated into larger groups. One of the hallmarks of a fairy tale is of course magic. I feel like another hallmark is magic sort of operating in an unexpected way, or people realizing that they should have been more careful what they wished for. So we see a lot of like fairy godmothers, magical items, wishes and curses and things like that. There will also often be magical creatures involved, but it is sort of hard to box in what a fairy tale is exactly, which I think is one of the reasons I'm so drawn to them. You kind of know it when you see it, but it's hard to define in so many words, right? I think what's interesting for me is I typically associate fairy tales with sort of a darker feel that usually results in a happy ending, but doesn't always. Like The Little Mermaid, the original story, that's a fairy tale, but it ends in a very sad way. Not all fairy tales are very dark, of course, but even the ones with happy endings for their protagonists, like the original Cinderella story, she ends up like facilitating the murder of her stepsister and stepmother in some versions. So there's definitely like a darker, gory feel. It feels a little bit like an artifact of a different time because of that, because violence was just more the norm. Not the norm necessarily, but it was just more a facet of everyday life. But anyway, let's hop right into these recommendations because I could talk about fairy tales probably all day. And Monty's back up here. Hello, baby boy. The first book on my list is Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen. This is one that I read as an arc a little while back. It's a young adult fantasy. Most of these are. I would love to see more adult fairy tale vibe type stories, but you know, it is what it is so far. This is literally set in a fairy tale world, like kind of how Shrek is, but you know, make it young adult fantasy. So a girl with the gift of prophecy serves this king, and they've both been conspiring to basically use her prophetic visions for political gain. Like she will twist the truth to influence the public opinion of, you know, whatever action he might be taking. Ow. Ow, ow. But the king's son is this total goody two-shoes, and he really objects to this, and he is actually next in line, and his rule is going to be really different. She's probably not going to have a place in it. Why do you do this? There's nothing past the top of my head. They have a really complicated history, and then he ends up being cursed, and she has to save him. So this one, you know, it wasn't perfect. None of the books on this list are ever going to be perfect, right? And I'm very picky, but I enjoyed it because one, the main character is actually diaspora. She's Asian in this like white majority country, so that was a really interesting perspective. It's a little goofy, but I feel like it was really fun. Like it just really leaned into the whole like Shrek-esque fairy tale setting, which, you know what? I have no objections to that. That is super fun. I wish more people went ham instead of like taking themselves a little bit too seriously. It's also got sort of an enemies to lovers type beat, so if you're interested in that, this could be the book for you. Next book on my list is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Iconically sexy retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. That's my first bullet point on here. It's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. It's got weird fairy tale magic rules and a weird fairy tale king, and it is so fun, so richly written, beautifully written. A wintry setting. The main character is Jewish, or like the equivalent of Jewish, which is pretty much Jewish in this world. I really actually love Naomi Novik's work, and this is probably my favorite book from her. It is due for a reread for me at some point this year. It's just so much fun. It's so much fun, and it's just so fairy tale. It's got like that je ne sais quoi of the fairy tale elements, fairy tale characters, fairy tale situations. Next book is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. I'm of course a Margaret Owen stan. I will always recommend her books for people who want a young adult fantasy that doesn't feel like the same 3 books that have been coming out over and over again since 2018. So this is actually a retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale, which is one I had not heard of. It's a very German-inspired fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel type of world building. So gods and magic and fairy tales as well as a major cultural element. These are all really big parts of the world. I love that. This was also the case with Violet Made of Thorns, but I think Little Thieves integrates it just a little bit more naturally, where stories just get disseminated as fairy tales. The actual plot of this book is that it's a fun heist. It has a lot of moving parts. It basically follows the main character who is nasty. She's so nasty. I love her. She's a cursed thief. She has stolen the identity of a beloved princess with magic, so the Goose Girl, and now she's dealing with the consequences of her thieving lifestyle, her nastiness, and her identity theft and other crimes. The next book on this list is Not Good for Maidens by Tori Bovalino. This is a dark modern fairy tale with a contemporary setting, which I also really like to see. I think I just really enjoy seeing fairy tales in different contexts, like the context of a world where fairy tales are real or where they're not, or our world. So this revolves around the goblin market. It actually follows 2 generations of women trying to survive it, so it's split between 2 time periods. Honestly, my favorite part about this book was the goblin market. It's written in such like an intriguing, mystical way. I feel like it's very different from the fae courts that we see in a lot of young adult fantasy. Like, it's so dense and like so busy and so dark and so interesting. It has that like original Grimm Brothers kind of vibe, like that dark fairy tale feeling where, yeah, the magic is beautiful, but it's also grotesque and awful, and it like harms people, and it's very dangerous feeling. Like, you are stressed for these characters every time they go in. This book is also queer, so if you're looking for queer fairy tales, that is this. I actually really recommend this one. It was a lot of fun. The next book is 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. I really like Elizabeth Lim's work. I've read almost everything that she's put out, like all her original stuff, specifically set in this world. She does this really interesting thing where she blends mythology from different cultures, mainly Chinese culture, into this like very fairy tale narrative. It's sort of like playing with that line between myth and fairy tale, which doesn't even really exist. They're just all very like folklore heavy. Her young adult fantasy really appeals to me for this. I feel like it's also not super focused on like the spice at all. All of these are very sort of wholesome romances, and they're always a little bit by the book, but I think sometimes you just need that. It's like a comfort read. So in this one, a mischievous princess and her 6 brothers get cursed by her evil stepmother. So the story follows her as she tries to break everyone's curses. It's not super fast-paced. I feel like it feels very much like a fable. She sort of learns the error of her ways. So basically what this is a retelling of the Wild Swans fairy tale with an East Asian setting and some twists on original fairy tale tropes. The next book is A Hunger of Thorns by Lily Wilkinson. This one caught me totally off guard. I honestly don't even remember requesting this arc, but I got it as an arc. So this is absolutely a dark fairy tale, modern setting. I like that the books that have a more like fantasy or historically rooted setting feel a little more wholesome, and then the ones that have a modern setting are like fucked up. So in this, a young witch has lost all her powers, but she kind of doesn't mind. She sort of doesn't mind being normal. Magic is a known part of this world, so it's sort of like an alternate universe type beat. There's actually a lot of really interesting world building involved in that, so I'm not going to spoil it. I wish it had been explored a little bit more, but I feel like it was just very cool, like the glimpses that we get to see throughout the book. This witch still retains her gift for stories and storytelling, and then she ends up embarking on this quest to save her friend that has disappeared in this sort of like kind of cursed area. They're also estranged. There's a very heavy queer element to this. It's really interesting and complex, and like one of the most realistic depictions, I think, of like fixating on someone and not knowing that it's attraction or love that you're experiencing, and it's sort of manifesting in this really like kind of unhealthy way. But I think it's important to see things like that, like relationships or situations in young adult fiction that are not like by the numbers, perfect. Oh, you meet, you fall in love, you kiss, you date. I think that sort of storytelling is fine, but if you see it just again and again in everything, it sets up weird expectations. I love to see stuff like this. And then the last book, or 2 books, are Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies and Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. So I can only really describe these as adult Spiderwick chronicles, which I was obsessed with as a kid. I had this like fake bestiary with beautiful hand-done watercolor illustrations that I would just pore over. Like, it was an actual piece of nonfiction literature when I was very little. These are so good, so fun. I feel like people kind of have them on their radar already. I was lucky enough to get an ARC for both, so just YouTuber things. These are written in the form of a diehard fairy researcher's journal. She is an academic. She studies this for a living. She is so obsessed with her work, and she even has like little footnotes in her personal diary because she is so nuts. Her academic rival shows up unexpectedly to help her as she's on this research trip in like fake Iceland. They actually have a really fun and cute romance that develops over time. It's very bantery, but I think I just really like both characters on their own, which is why I kind of like them together. And they bring out sort of like different traits in each other. They're just really great foils. The combination of magic and science, or viewing magic through the lens of scientific research, just like tickles my heart. It just entertains me because of course, if this were a real job that could be done, I would be doing this. I would not be doing anything else. Unfortunately, it's not, so I have to live vicariously through these books. The second one is just as fun as the first. I'll talk about it a little bit more in my quarterly wrap-up, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you expect. It's also set in Austria, which I feel like we got to explore that setting and the village a little bit less just because so much more is happening in terms of the plot, but that was also pretty fun. I like the change in setting with every book. Okay, so that is all of the books that I have to cover today. Thank you so much for watching this. I will have a real video out soon. I've been working on just getting some more scripts done, but I've had a lot of stupid visa shit to contend with, so I'm settling into my routine as a full-time writer slash content creator, so we're getting there. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!